Good evening and welcome to Frames. I'm Jim Eltoff. Tonight, more from the documentary that we began on the last show called Blood Brothers, How Our Kids Become Killers. And with me again is Jim Hausschultz, who directed, wrote, and edited Blood Brothers. Jim, welcome back.
Thank you.
We're going to start off tonight with a segment, Blue Bloods, in which we'll hear from cops and judge and social workers. What are we going to learn from these people? Are these people with answers?
The most we can learn from them is to say, what is your experience? Two things. We talk to a cop that drives down the street and is afraid for his life.
Yeah.
And we talk with a judge who, in the back of his chambers, started a school. And he started a school even for kids who were never coming out of school, because he said they're human beings. They've been damaged. They will live, and I respect that they should have an opportunity to learn. He started the school back there. That was Jimmy Edwards.
Yeah.
And Jimmy Edwards is well known in the city for accomplishing a great many things.
Yeah. All right, well, let's find out what some of those things are. Here's Blue Bloods from the documentary Blood Brothers.
Being even on our end, being a nurse, I guess people dying starts to become just the way things are. People being injured starts to become just the way things are. And if you allow that to become personal, it'll tear you up inside. Being a policeman over years tears you up. Emotionally, beats you down. Physically, beats you down. But it's just your reality, just what you're a part of. I guess if you don't do it, who's going to do it? Somebody has to do that. I think a lot of people forget that when you talk about policemen. They forget that, I guess when you deal with nothing but bad things in your life, everything that you do, when you come to work, somebody's going to get dying, somebody's going to get hurt, somebody's going to try to kill you. That's your reality. Imagine that going to work every day. It's not about just seeing people die and get hurt. It's about your own personal safety. Imagine driving around 8 hours a day, just for an entire year, or maybe your whole career, and this is what you do. Your whole shift, you do this the entire time. Every gangway you pass, you do this. Your partner on the side, if you have one, he's doing this, or she's doing that. Every gangway, every car you pass, every person you're looking at. I'll tell you what, that's stressful just in itself, because you always feel like someone's trying to kill you. And you know what? They are. There is somebody out there that eventually is going to take that shot at you. And when you're not paying attention, that's when you get killed. Maybe.
Shootings that occur now, we didn't have when I worked the streets. I mean, yeah, people shot at each other once in a while, or there was a shooting, but we didn't have drive-bys. We didn't have a child getting shot from a stray bullet and all of those things. That didn't happen. So I'm not surprised when I hear it, not at all. And now I don't encourage people to become a police officer. It's not something that I would do today. If I were young enough to do it again, as much as I love the work, I would not be inclined to do it today, because when I was doing it, not so many people were shooting back. I mean, I was always concerned if I stopped a vehicle that you have to be careful, the person may be armed, et cetera, et cetera. But we just didn't have gangs in the way that we have them today. It was just different. Today they're shooting back with bigger guns and more guns than we have, kind of thing. So,
the police are in a tough situation. If they're going to be taken as legitimate, they have to use force very sparingly. The problem is they interact mostly with people who don't grant them much legitimacy, and therefore, what do they have left but force to use? To the extent that they use force, they have even less legitimacy. And so they're caught in this terrible situation of how do you break out of that? And so in very crime-ridden communities, the police are dealing with people who are the hardest to deal with. And so they're in the situation where they're the most tempted to rely on force to do their jobs. And the more they use force, the less legitimacy they have. And this serves to alienate them from the community.
Unfortunately, the police are looked at more as a foe as opposed to a friend or peaceful or neutral. At best case scenario, police should be looked at as a neutral, in my opinion. Look, I'm not either for or against, I'm just for peace. What do we need to do to solve the problem? What do we need to do to stop the violence in this neighborhood?
And as a policeman, you come in, and here you are trying to solve, 10 years of problems in 15 minutes. Oh, that's not realistic. We all know that. But that's your purpose at that time. And when you talk to these people, they don't understand how to interact. They don't understand how to resolve their conflicts. Their only understanding of resolving conflicts is through, I'm not saying violence, but through anger. They get upset. They don't know how to interact with people. You ask a guy why he shot someone, because he called him a name.
The reason most children engage in violence toward each other is because they have not been taught to resolve their issues by speaking, or resolving their issues simply by turning away. And all behavior is learned behavior. Unfortunately, you cannot learn good behavior when your dad is incarcerated for murder, or when your mom has been locked up 19 times. Either she is crack addicted or perhaps even mentally ill.
And a lot of times some of these guys want to listen, but they're in a difficult situation from their point of view. Well, if I talk to you, if I believe what you're saying, Mr. Officer, and I put my gun down, can you guarantee the other guy's going to put his gun down? What happens to me when I walk down the street without my gun because I'm listening to you? I become a target. Now they hit me. Who's going to feed my kids? Who's going to talk to my mother?
It's cold to say, but a lot of it is normal. It's something you see every day. I mean, it's unusual for you, but it's not unusual for a lot of these guys. They see this. They live it every day. I mean, some of those teddy bears might be car accidents that you see tacked to the light pole and taped to the light pole might be because of a car accident, might be a shooting. So, I mean, you're experiencing this kind of stuff every day. We got a guy on our case load, his brother done been killed. Then he told me the other day somebody kicked in his cousin's house, stomped him out, nearly shot him, took whatever drugs or whatever they had. And he just talking about like this is a normal, everyday occurrence. Even though to me, and I heard, I'm like, oh, okay, that's messed up. Socially, and as my background is in social work, and I done got this, this level of education that I have. I'm like, man, that explains a whole lot about you as an individual, and in your circumstances. Whereas having grew up like that, I'm like, oh, okay, okay, because okay, that's his typical day, and that's a day in the life of him.
Because like I said, a lot of these guys and girls who are involved in this activity, a lot of them know right from wrong. They know better. But they're put in difficult situations. Even for me, I know right from wrong. I'm somewhat educated from what they tell me. But if you put me in some of these situations, and someone's to come say, well, next time I see you, I will kill you, I can tell you exactly what I would do. I like to believe I do the right thing, follow the proper procedures, call the police, take everything. But if somebody called and threatened my family, I don't know what I would do.
Well, if you talk to young people who are in some of these communities with violence, they really have no hope. And that's part of the reason, I think, why they produce these types of behaviors. Because if you really had hope that you had a future, you wouldn't be engaged in these types of activity. No one would be a gang member. No one would put themselves at risk for an early death if they had hope that they were going to have a productive future. So really, it is all about a lack of hope in these communities. When you have an environment that is very violent, when you have an educational level that's very low, when you have unemployment, when you don't have any positive role models that can really give you a sense that you can do something different in your life, there really is no hope. And so a lot of these young people you talk to will tell you that I don't expect to be anything. I don't expect to live very long. And so if you don't expect to live very long, if you don't expect to really have any positive career or pursuits in your life, then why not be reckless? Why not do whatever you think you could do to make your life better at this time, at least what you perceive to be a better life?
If you don't set the next generation up for something better, they're going to do the exact same thing the current generation is doing. So I think a lot of people need to realize that you can't arrest your way out the problem, you can't shoot your way out the problem. Sooner or later, somebody has to sit down and talk. You might not like what you hear. You might not understand a lot of things that are being said. You may not have an insight into how some people are thinking. But if you talk long enough, you will. And I believe if everyone talks a little bit more and find out what the real crux of the matter is, I think there is a lot of solutions out there.
There's very rigorous experiments that are done to really help us understand what works to reduce heart attacks or strokes, or before a medicine is put out on the market. But in the area of violence, we don't seem to take evidence as seriously. There's lots and lots of innovative things happening, lots of new ideas, and yet we don't seem to accumulate lessons learned about what works for whom under what circumstance in the same way that we do in medicine.
Well, we certainly know that violence tends to be a young man's game, and there are many teenagers across America who go through a phase where there's some level of violent activity that they age out of. And so one of the real challenges that we have in public policy is to get people through those adolescent and young adult years when their violent offending is at its peak. If you look at criminal careers, I've done some work on the criminal careers of drug users, and a lot of these drug users will actually commit property crimes for a long time. If you're a heroin addict, you're stealing car radios or doing something if you're a street heroin user and you've maintained a costly habit and you have no ability to pay for those drugs. But if you look at the amount of violent offending by those offenders, what you see is it's really peaked in those young adult years, and it really goes down quite a bit. They may be stealing your car radio at age 35, but they're a lot less likely to be trying to kill you at age 35. And so age is actually a very important factor. And one of the ironies is that the way sentencing works, we often really throw the book at people as they pass out of the phase where they're really the biggest threat in terms of their violent offending.
There's a lot of good early childhood education research showing that really the biggest benefits that we get for investing in early childhood, the big payoff really is in the crime reduction area. There's also reason to think that maybe as a society, investments would be better spent when kids are a little bit older and more clearly have identified that they're the ones at greatest risk for violence and crime, when they start to sort of act out in ways that sort of demonstrate that, getting arrested, starting to drop out of school, those are sort of behaviors that certainly indicate that that young person is really at risk. And so there's reason to think that investing later may also be a good strategy to really try to reduce crime and violence.
Well, I think pressuring adults who can influence young people to make sure that they don't use that influence to get those kids guns is a critical thing. David Kennedy has done some important work in this. A lot of kids who commit gun crimes are committing crimes that happen because they're a 17 or 18-year-old kid having 17 or 18-year-old conflicts. But if they're connected to a gang, and an adult in that gang helps them get access to a gun, then all of a sudden that fight over that girlfriend or whatever is going on is more likely to be lethal.
I think as a society we really try to sort of assign blame. When a young person commits a homicide, there are very swift and certain sanctions. It is taken very seriously, and yet we don't recognize the fact that how did this young person get a gun? And the fact that they happen to have a gun, had they had a different weapon, the outcome would have been entirely different. It would have been maybe a schoolyard fight that ended up with, you know, kids going to the principal's office. But the availability of a gun really changes the outcome, obviously for the person on, you know, who is shot at, but also for the young person who happens to pick up a gun. And I think it's very tempting to sort of sort the world into good guys and bad guys, good kids and bad kids. And I don't think that's the reality. I think that some young people have easier access to guns, and when a gun is used in a violent encounter, it's much more likely to be lethal or near lethal, and get them involved in the juvenile or criminal justice system. And the same encounter could happen absent the gun, and it's an entirely different set of circumstances. The life course of the person who gets into the schoolyard fight with the stick or the fist, is going to get through that and probably without a criminal record.
911, what's your emergency? Station 1 call, 8524 miles. Station 1. Be advised, the suspect is armed and considered extremely dangerous. Did you get the traffic? Parker Burner Point.
Well, the situation with gun violence in the city of St. Louis is one that really celebrates, I think, a culture of violence. It's really a part of sort of the day-to-day environment that many young people live in the city of St. Louis. And I think it manifests itself for a lot of different reasons. One of which, of course, is low education in the neighborhoods. And so there isn't a means to produce some kind of status through normal, legitimate courses of action. So if your education level is so low and you don't have an opportunity to really excel in school, to have a decent job, to move forward or progress in life, I think in some respects, violence is a way of gaining status in your neighborhood. And so a lot of it has to do with that at a very basic level. And then there are other reasons why I think violence is accelerated in some neighborhoods in the city of St. Louis. Because of that sort of celebration of violence, violence used as a means of gaining status, many people carry weapons simply for self-protection because the environment is such that I might need to carry a weapon to protect myself, to show that I have some status. In having that status, you protect yourself. And then you have the added issues of violence related to normal criminal activity, robberies and gangs. And so it's really a mix of a lot of different factors that fuel this violence in some of these communities in the city of St. Louis.
The purpose of street gangs is to provide love. The purpose of street gangs is to provide a sense of belonging. Our children join these gangs because they identify with each other. When 5 or 6 kids get together and they create a street gang, they have something in common. They have a lack of parental supervision, a lack of family love, too much idle time, and economic constraints. Those are the common threads of a street gang, and they identify with each other. And when they talk to each other, they realize that they come from similar home environments. And so, wow, this is wonderful. We're just alike. And so when they come in, they're looking for love. And so anybody that's willing to show them any attention, positive attention, showing them love, a sense of belonging, then they're interested. If you don't show love, if you show no interest, or if it's cursory. See, our kids understand if you're there because you're being paid to be there. They're bright. They understand whether you're there because you're being compelled to be there or you want to be there. See, if you want to be there, automatically they connect. If you don't want to be there, if you're being paid to be there, if it's a burden to be there, they understand those things as well.
Part of the way they make themselves feel secure in the world is simply by accepting that they live in a dangerous environment where anything could happen. They have this a kind of a feeling of early anticipated death, strong sense of fatalism. There is no tomorrow. I might not wake up tomorrow. I'm going to get mine today. Part of it's that. Part of it's just that the life I lead is dangerous. I know it's dangerous. Now soldiers go through the same thing. That they know that this is dangerous. They know that this could happen, and so that's part of the way in which they're able to, carry on in their environment and get through their day. And they use this kind of, they try to create an impression of toughness as well to provide themselves with some kind of a deterrent ability so that they can advertise their ability to deter aggression. But, just like the fastest draw, there's going to be somebody out there who's going to want to use your reputation for toughness and take that as a challenge.
I'm just trying to think of the right way to answer this. I think thinking about your future, thinking about college, careers, those kinds of things, in many ways is a luxury. I think a lot of kids who are growing up in urban areas, it literally, is figuring out how to get to school, never mind what they're going to do in school, is a big challenge because of safety issues, because of the concerns that they have, because of what's going on in their lives. And so, and that's why one of the reasons why I think it's really important to help ensure that schooling seems relevant to the lives that kids are living, so that they can see the connections between why is it important today to go to school, because it really, thinking about something a year from now, 5 years from now, is something that not every kid gets to do. They don't necessarily see the connection between why I should take the risk of walking through 3 different gang boundary lines to get to my school when, I could stay home and, there are friends that I can hang around with, there are, ways to make money.
Well, I think the first thing we have to do, because the situation has really, in some situations, spiraled out of control, you have to really start to suppress the violence initially. And I think the only way you can really start to suppress it and show consequences is you really have to really kind of extract those individuals who are the most problematic out of the neighborhoods. I think traditionally, and if you look across many communities now, for many years the police departments and communities have said there's nothing we can do about this violence. It's neighborhoods preying on themselves, young people who are involved in gang activity, involved in drug activity, they won't come forward, and so it's an endless cycle of violence that goes on and on. I think most police chiefs are saying, well, we know the situation, but the most important thing in terms of crime is not drugs, it's the life and safety not only of people who are not involved in all of this violence and gangs, but the young people who are wrapped in the violence.
I mean, people still have their dreams, they have their ideas, they have, they know what they want, they just don't know how to go about getting it. And what I mean by that, they don't know how to utilize the system and work the system. They used to being on the margins of society. I can function on the margins. I know the process to go through to get Section 8. I know the process to go through to get food stamps and so forth and so on. But what I don't know is how I can go about setting up for retirement, how I can go about managing money, saving money. I don't have that financial literacy. I don't know what it takes to be a homeowner. I heard of people getting homes. I don't know what it takes to be a homeowner. And so now, those things that help me function in mainstream society, I don't know how to do. I know how to do this. I know how to exist on the margins, but I don't know how to exist in mainstream society.
This may sound strange, but I would describe my job being like a very successful lung surgeon. When someone gets cancer, I'm great at removing the lung and hopefully getting the person a good life the remainder of that time. But the real answer is not to have great cancer surgeons, it's to not smoke. And the best thing to do is not to have programs post-prison, but aim at programs to getting people so they don't go to prison. I think without any doubt the best thing that we can do is start working in the at-risk schools and start just putting in programs, mentoring programs, and asking people, if you could have any job in the world, what would it be? I've asked over 1,000 people that, and I've only received 2 crazy answers. One guy was mentally ill, high school dropout, and he said he wanted to be involved in industrial espionage working for Anheuser-Busch, so we weren't able to place him. But the majority of the people have realistic goals. And what we need to do is just start finding out what people want in life and start finding out what barriers are there and knock them out. And we need to do it at a much younger age, and we need to do it before they go to prison and not after.
I think that the fact that children in this country can kill has really kind of given us license to say, you know, certain kids are bad kids, and you know, our kids are more violent, and really move towards a more punitive, both juvenile justice and criminal justice system, not because our kids are different, but because as a social policy matter, we've decided as a country it's important for guns to be easily available, and one byproduct of that is kids then have easier access to guns, and kids who have easier access to guns are more likely to end up in lethal encounters, both as victims and as perpetrators. But I do think that that has really shaped the way that we look at young people. We're afraid of young people, and certainly we're afraid of young people who don't look like our kids look like.
I understand that my primary responsibility is to safeguard the community, to protect the community. Our statutes in the state of Missouri are very unique. Children will return back to our communities irrespective of what I think and what the public thinks at the age of 18. And so the question becomes is, how do you want them back? If you don't invest in rehabilitation, what we get more sophisticated criminals.
We've been watching another segment of Jim Hauschult's documentary about kids and guns. Jim, one of the people you interviewed, a police officer or maybe it was a judge, says we can't arrest our way out of this problem. You agree?
Yes, we cannot. We already own too many prisons as it is. We have discussions about how we're going to pay for prisons and what are we going to do when they get out, because most people who get out haven't been rehabilitated, they're just professional. They've learned how to do what they did before better. They've learned how to survive in ways that you and I couldn't begin to understand. So doing that, no, there are other countries that do it differently than us and are more effective.
Well, we can't arrest our way out of this. We can't get the guns off the streets. That's pretty depressing.
Oh, yeah.
Isn't it?
Yeah, sure.
Where does that leave us? Where we are now and more of the same coming up?
Well, yes, and if I may, as I entered the building today, you have signs all up and down the hallway talking about a shooting, an active shooting response.
Yeah.
Here in the county, far away from North St. Louis, and it's continuing to move away. That's it's the word is not unacceptable. It's okay. Now what do we do?
Yeah.
And there are ways to answer that.
All right, we'll come back to that. But before we get to our next segment, let me just ask about you a little bit. You have a production company, Blackbird Creative. What's that about?
Yeah, I spent 12 years at Merritt's. Merritt's was a huge production facility on the coasts in Chicago and here. And then I decided to go out on my own. And opened a production company based upon, we're writers, first of all, but we also will produce what we write and direct what we produce.
So a lot of commercial, industrial, business kinds of...
Right, and speech writing.
And speech writing.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
All right, let's get back to it with a segment called Bullet Points from Blood Brothers.
Boy, I guess I first became interested in shooting when I was a little boy, and I saw my grandfather's shotgun hidden away in a closet. And I think then I became fascinated with guns and hunting and shooting. But it wasn't until much, much later, till after I was 50, that I actually shot a gun. My father was not a hunter. My grandfather had passed away, and his guns were given away to other grown-ups. And all of that just sort of went dormant. I began shooting then as a grown man. I was a father, and a friend of mine who had gone on the hunt every year with his kids and had gone hunting with his father invited my son and I along to go deer hunting 10 years ago. And that's when I started shooting.
I think shooting for me has been just pure enjoyment. Although I'm competitive in a lot of areas, shooting isn't particularly one of them. I've done some different kinds of matches. But mainly it's just a way to get together with friends and go to the range and shoot some guns, which I consider industrial art. I'm as interested in where the bullet comes from as where it goes. And then just enjoy the camaraderie that it inspires.
I'm the Chicago Cubs of deer hunters. But I love the outdoors. I love the camaraderie. I studied martial arts for 28 years, and so I'm very interested in all things having to do with martial arts, of which guns I include among them.
I am a member of the NRA. I have resisted. It's cheaper to be a life member if you're at least as optimistic as I am about how long you're going to live. But I have some problems with the politics that the NRA promulgates. I think they would prefer very draconian punishment for people that use guns in crimes. I mean, I think it's sort of it's got a harshness to their politics that I do not agree with. But I do agree with their lobbying efforts to allow people to possess guns and use them lawfully. So I am an annual member of the NRA.
Why do people, why do teens get into gun violence? Are they making a statement for themselves? Because it really does. It really does. It makes a statement. Not only is it a shock to the community, depending on who their friends are, it could be like a, ride on for them, which is completely wrong, but maybe they're trying to prove something to themselves, prove something to the community. Maybe there's a lot of built up anger inside them. I can't say that they don't know any better because, like I said, I believe that, the laws of man are written on everybody's heart at birth. That's what I believe. But I think a lot of it is, you know, the way people are being brought up. I think it's discipline, because you could go against your own will. You could go against, you know, you could go against everything everybody else tells you to do as well. However, if you're doing that, I think it's because you're trying to prove something to somebody.
Until we seize that concept and make a standard to which people's lives can be run, you're not going to get anywhere with this. There's nothing you can do about, you can try to eliminate drugs, which is they've been trying to since day one. You can eliminate the guns, but it's always going to be something. And the minute you focus on, let's get rid of the guns and see what happens, then we're going to have to go to the machetes. It's always going to be something. We've got to get to the trigger finger. We got to figure out what is going on there and stop it, because the person who's got the trigger finger ain't doing it for us. We got to figure out, we got to rewire that person. We got to help them figure out a different approach to life, because we're at the wrong end of the gun most of the time.
Whatever we want to say about it, it's the power of the lobby is such that it's not going to happen. And B, even if we manage to pass legislation like that, it would take so long to bleed those guns out of the system that there'd be so many people dead before we ever made any kind of headway. That from my perspective, we're better off trying to figure out what's going on in solving these disputes at the neighborhood level. I just think we've got to find a way to deal with that.
And that's going to be a lot of our future. It ain't going to stop. The guns are not going to get off the streets. We're not going to regulate it. We're not going to prohibit it.
I would say among 6th graders and above in this particular immediate community, there's more of a prevalence of guns than there are access to computers for those kids.
Well, things have changed differently as time has gone on. Violence has always been a part of mankind, as far back as we can really, I guess we can really measure. So it's not uncommon for a person to kill another person. I guess where we get to it is you start justifying killing people. Is it justifiable to kill someone? You know, first thing you maybe ask of a policeman involved in shooting is, you know, how do you feel after that happened? Well, most policemen will tell you, and I can't speak from, I have to make a generalization, you can't speak for everybody, most policemen will tell you, I didn't want to have to kill that person. That was something that I had to do for whatever reason, to protect yourself or someone else. But I guess it gets desensitized maybe in society a little bit, that as a guy in the neighborhood, you commit crimes for certain reasons. Maybe you commit violent crimes, you kill someone or assault someone, because that's just the way life is now.
Well, as probation officers, we interact with a lot of people. And so after a while, you get to know the people somewhat. So they tell you stories, say, hey, so-and-so's house got shot up yesterday. Hey, somebody tried to shoot my little brother yesterday. My auntie's boyfriend was shot and killed. Or my auntie's boyfriend was shot. Did he make a police report? Nah, he didn't want to talk to the police. But the wound wasn't that bad. We fixed it ourselves. So it's almost a whole subculture that's bubbling under the public's eye. Every now and then they'll spill into the public eye, and that's the first time the general public will take notice of it, but it's a constant state of warfare in some of these neighborhoods, in some of these communities. So they almost become dull to what's going on. They think it's normal.
Oh, I don't think that there's anything particularly unique about St. Louis style violence. I suspect that the factors that promote violence here are the same factors that promote violence in other places, and I think that, you know, if you look across the United States, you'll find that violence is concentrated amongst young men with a lot of time on their hands without effective access to law, often because they themselves are involved in criminal activity.
I just always go back to thinking about my best friend who got killed, and that was the difference between he and I. He actually went to college longer than I did initially starting off. He actually got the football scholarship. I was the walk-on. This is my best friend. he was living with mom and dad and I wasn't. But the difference was that he was involved with the guys in his neighborhood and just got so deep involved, and it eventually took his life.
The gun violence is huge, and you just can't go by what's reported, because a lot of these individuals who are involved in this type of criminal activities, the only time they really go to police and the hospital if it's something they can't fix themselves. So it's a lot of shootings that go unreported.
Because this is just the way life is now. Well, I think we need to find some of the answers and where it's deteriorated and why it is the way it is now. A lot of these young guys interact. They don't want to be disrespected. I go back to that same word. They do it for protection. But the reason it's changed from fist to guns, you know, it's not the availability of guns. That is part of it, though. You have to admit it's part of the availability of guns is why there would be an increase. There's more manufacturers now, and guns are being shipped in. People are using them more. But why? You can't just blame it on the availability of guns. Why are people using them more? You know, it goes back to the old phrase, a gun doesn't kill you, a person does. I have to pull the trigger in order to kill you or to shoot you with it. So it goes back to the social portion of it.
A lot of these kids have their minds formatted and set at 13, 14. And unfortunately, even if you make it to 19 and 20 or 22 and you start to see the light, you want to change your lifestyle, a lot of these kids have done some things that other people won't let them forget. So yeah, okay, I used to shoot, I used to rob, I used to be a gang member, but I want to be a family man now. I've seen the light. I know the errors of my ways. But that next person who you may have shot their relative, they haven't forgotten about you. So you may be 25, you may be 30, you may be 35, but when they catch you and they exact their revenge. So you have a lot of guys in almost impossible situations, and females. I don't really want to carry the gun, but if I don't carry the gun, I'm the next target.
One of the things that's interesting about the concealed carry weapon legislation is that if you think about it, it's effectively an attempt to extend the retaliatory potential of these neighborhoods to law-abiding citizens.
It's not the manufactured guns that are the enemy. You know, I'm not saying the people are the enemy, but it's our mistake. It's our fallacy from not getting involved in society and finding and answering those questions. And maybe we've asked them, but we're not doing anything about it, because if we were, there would be different. There would be a change.
I think one of the reasons that we have to start doing interventions at earlier ages is because of the economic cost to our country. The Department of Justice reports that if incarceration rates remain the same, 1 out of every 3 African American males will serve a prison term. That's a prison term for a felony conviction, not a jail term for a bad check or DUI. The current cost of incarcerating someone nationally averages over $27,000 a year. We could send these people to college for less than we're sending them to prison. And they'll contribute to the tax base when they get out instead of take from it while they're in.
If you think about the impact on Americans' well-being from gun violence, it's really astonishing. Think of every person who commutes every day from a safe suburb because they're just afraid to live near where they work because they're just afraid of being the victim of a crime. There's some evidence that Chicago would have substantially more people living here if we had a lower crime rate.
But also there's the lost opportunity. You know, businesses don't want to go into areas where violence is a significant problem. So the tax base is really depleted.
The economics are just, we incarcerate more people than any other country on the planet. We view China as an oppressive country, but China has 3 times our population, yet we have 500,000 more people incarcerated than what China does. And it has to be paid by the taxpayers. And we can either do it for a negative thing and warehouse people, or we can spend that money earlier and prevent the need for the warehousing.
So I think if not for moral reasons, for economic reasons, we all should care much more about gun violence and ways to, think about ways to reduce it, because we all are paying the price. I mean, we here at the University of Chicago estimate that the cost to the city of Chicago of gun violence is about $2.5 billion a year, and that boils down to $2,500 per household. So it's not a trivial amount.
Another thing is, Every year since 1988, there have been more people go to prison for nonviolent crimes than violent crimes. When I first went to work for the federal system, I was in Oklahoma, and I remember when the Murrah building blew up. And I walked around the Murrah building shortly thereafter, and I remember looking down at the sidewalk at the stain of dried blood and looking up and realizing that I was in front of the daycare center. There are some people that need to go away forever. There are some people that may even need to pay a greater price than that. But it's not all of these people, not 1 out of every 3 African American males, not 1 out of every 15 adults in the United States, and that's what we're doing. If rates stay the same, 1 out of every 15 people in the country, males, females, all races, are going to go to prison. And we just can't afford that.
It's expected in a certain way that the kids in the inner city get shot, and people say that's sad, but that's just kind of the way it is. And we have to really fight that, because it's not inevitable at all. And it's not something we need to live with. And at other times and places, kids in the inner city, including kids living in very poor conditions, are not getting shot. And so we can really do something about that. And we have to make sure that we don't just kind of see it as part of the environment. That's just something that's sad, but that we all have to live with, because that's not true.
One of my absolute pet peeves is when somebody gets shot and the powers that be sort of say, oh, they were just in the wrong place at the wrong time. That's not to say that there aren't certain areas, certain groups of people, certain times of day where bad things are more likely to happen. But I just sort of recoil a little bit when I hear that term used when people are being shot and killed. We are a free, supposedly civil society, and since when is being out in society, when does that become being at the wrong place at the wrong time?
So, where's the problem? What is the genesis of gun violence? If we peel back that onion, where is the genesis of all of this destruction?
Well, young people, as I said earlier, are not trained killers. They don't start out as killers. So there's got to be some person in their life that they respect that has taught them, or at least indicated to them, that violence is a way of, as I said, gaining respect or providing what you need to get by in life. And so there's got to be someone in a young person's life who in some respects is teaching them to kill, teaching them to be violent.
It's certainly not, and it did not originate with a 12-year-old. Certainly hasn't come from a 16-year-old or a 17-year-old. Who is the real culprit? Who has the responsibility to stop this? The children?
You ever watched the movie The 300?
No, I didn't.
With the Spartans?
Yeah, I know of it.
Yeah. Their whole culture was geared toward war. Not making peace, not making poetry, not making music, not contributing to the sciences. Their whole culture was based on war. Women were taught to look up to the warrior. Warriors wanted to die in battle. They looked forward to it. They thought it was the greatest thing ever. Yet, society will look back at a period in time like that and say how wonderful the Greeks were, how glorious it was to be a Greek Spartan. That was an honor. That was a code of conduct. And they praised that type of behavior. Yet you see the exact same behavior occurring in your country, in your city, in your neighborhood, and all of a sudden you're appalled by it. It's the exact same thing. Some of these kids are growing up in environments where being a drug dealer, being a gangbanger, being a thief is looked up to. People aspire to do that. And just like it sounds somewhat absurd to me because that's not the environment I grew up in, I can understand it. Because if in my environment the idea was to go to school, get a house. So if someone was to interject themselves into my goals and say, look, it's wrong to go to school, what? No, it's not. That's all I know. So a lot of times I think people have to place themselves in those situations and understand what their own value system is, the moral, before you judge someone else's value system. Now, I don't agree with this violence. I don't like the violence. But until I understand the violence, I can't even contribute to the conversation. Because there's a lot of people pointing fingers, but until you truly put yourself in that situation, you'll never really come up with a solution.
We live for a long time, but yet some people think it's too short. I think the mortality of the situation, like, affects you how you live your day to day.
Yeah.
Because if you knew you were living to be 220 years old, I mean, why would you be doing your homework that was due the next day?
Yeah.
Because heck, you could do high school when you're 80, 82.
Yeah,
you could. So I mean, I think, I don't know, something about the mortality and just like how we do if, I don't know. Bottom line is, I want to live to be at least 100 and make it on that Smucker's draw on the Today Show.
It's interesting.
That's
that,
the goal.
Like, it's interesting that you mentioned too short and life being too short. And I think for some people in the situations that we've been talking about today, their lives are cut too short, be it the people firing the gun or the people who are killed by that gun. Those people who fire the gun, they're looking at a long time in prison, and in some cases even life. They could be our age, and their life is over. What could have been a promising future has been cut short because of a choice they made. And the person who they killed, their family is deprived of them, they're deprived of their life, and again, another life that had so much potential is gone. And I think that's just a tragic thing, that so many lives are ruined by gun violence, that so many lives are taken and wasted because of guns.
Yeah. I think I'll live forever. No, I think I'll live a long time, but, you know, I just want to do something with myself. I feel like we've all like been preparing to get to live. And I feel like, you know what I mean? I feel like all we're doing right now is getting to like the point where we can be on our own and actually do something. So I want to get there.
I didn't really think about that. Like right now we're just preparing.
Yeah.
You know, like growing up, oh, I'm a teenager. I didn't really think about that. Like we're preparing.
Yeah, that's how I feel.
Yeah.
But I mean, life's good right now too. Preparing is great, but I want to actually do something with it.
Yeah, I just don't want to live in vain, you know? Like, I don't want to be, like, on my deathbed and, like, even if, like, things don't go according to, like, the plan I've been following, like, my dream is just, like, that I die, like, fulfilled. I don't want to, like, die thinking I didn't do enough or, you know, I didn't do what I want to do. So I just, like, that's kind of my dream, just, like whenever my time is, that I just do, like, kind of feel content with, like, what I've done. And, yeah.
Like, I want to make a mark, like,
yeah.
Like, maybe hopefully change someone's life and for the better, or like what I forget what Cheryl said yesterday.
Live a passionate life.
Yeah,
because if not, it's not worth living.
Yeah, that really got to me. I like that.
I don't know how long I'm gonna live, cause I be like my lifestyle. I think it can be shortened any time, you know.
That's a good enough reason. Don't nobody know how long they're gonna live.
Yeah. But when it's my time to go, I'm gone, so.
Live it while you can.
But I do want to accomplish a lot of stuff, and I want a big wedding before I leave.
That's a big wedding.
Out there wedding.
All right, what's the last one?
What are your dreams in life?
Dreams?
What are your dreams for your life?
My dreams for my life, like I said, go to school for a long time. I probably get married. I want to like get married around 48. Yeah, you know, cause I still gotta live. You heard me? When you get married, hey, listen. Once you get married, it's just over. You know what I'm saying? It's just that one person for the rest of your life.
Right.
Listen. I'm gonna have a girl. Right. That's what I'm saying. About 48. 50.
48.
Yeah, you know, I ain't gonna.
About 48 or 50. Right. You ain't gonna find nobody.
It ain't a point about finding. I'm gonna, man, listen. There's always gonna be somebody there. You know what I'm saying?
My dream is to be this lawyer that I want to be. I'm not playing. I want to be a lawyer. And I want to live in a mini mansion.
Not a mini mansion.
I want to live
I couldn't live in a big
house. I don't want no big house because people be creeping in people's house,
Yeah,
staying in their basement for months and stuff. In my closet, I go to the closet. How long you been here? Your whole family is it's too big.
Nah, I couldn't get it, man.
But my dreams for my life is being a doctor.
I would never let you
taking care of some of y'all kids if they get sick.
Yeah,
I won't be in St. Louis, but that's cool. But my dreams.
I travels around the world.
my dreams though, have my restaurant. Make sure my little sisters good. Make sure my mama good. You know what I'm saying? Just make sure my whole family good, and then I think I'll be successful at that. And then I'm good. Once they good, I'm good.
My dreams in life is be that forensic detective. You know, be happy. Like, my main thing is when I want to get old, I want to be happy. Not have to stress about nothing. I want my family to be happy. I want y'all to be happy. Like, when we get old, I want to be like, you don't remember me? You know what I'm saying? You remember me from Blood or whatever? I just want, like, everybody that I know, that I see, just to be happy and successful, you know, have money so they won't have to, you know, do bad things.
Have to want for nothing.
Yeah, and just love each other. That's all my happiness, my dream would be.
My dream is to be a mortician, married, and
your wedding.
With a big wedding ring. I've been forgetting about my wedding ring.
Quita.
Diamonds. Or a girl's best friend. Don't forget. Don't forget. But yeah, I'm gonna be a mortician making big money. You hear me? Then I'm gonna stay at my little house and I'm gonna take care of my family. Ain't nobody gonna want for nothing.
That's what's up. Yeah. That's what's up.
Especially if I got charity.
Yeah.
I think we all did good. You know, we expressed a whole bunch of stuff. We all did good.
Big salutes to y'all. Thank y'all for y'all thoughts.
Salute you too.
Coming in.
We've been watching the final segment of our documentary, Blood Brothers, written, directed, and edited by my guest, Jim Hausschultz. Jim, something I don't understand. All big cities are violence. There's plenty of crime to go around. Why is there so much more gun violence in St. Louis than almost any other major city? You see these rankings and polls and stuff about gun violence. We're at the top.
Well, one of the things, just a few years ago, we were number 4 in the in the placement of cities that is racially divided. We are a big donut that surrounds the whole, which is an area that we let and allowed African Americans mostly to live in, and we surrounded it.
Yeah.
Never went into it, never go through it, and don't know much about it. So we have that kind of physicalness to our place. Chicago has an enormous gun problem, but it's spread out. It's all over the place. It surrounds the University of Chicago, which is Harvard-like, but it surrounds it. We have relegated our problem to a place that we refuse to look at, and we just let it go.
Clearly these kids are taught to be violent. The behavior seems to go from generation to generation. Is there any way to break that cycle?
I'm sure there is. I don't have that kind of background. I have ideas on how to approach that. But as a psychiatrist who is a forensic psychiatrist told us, he's been shot twice, and that's why I wanted to talk to him. And he said the reason why we have gangs, for example, is because these kids are looking for people like them who they can love each other. Now, it's not a phrase you would go into a gang member's house and use. Oh, you love one another. No. But they find people who are their family.
Yeah.
Who are like them, and they will support them. And that's not uncommon to the rest of us. It's how policemen defend their situations in the department, how lawyers defend what they do for a living.
Yeah.
A gang has other options that are not so terrific.
Yeah. Your roundtable with high school kids, we saw some of that in this segment. Kids talking about being doctors and lawyers and opening restaurants, kids with dreams, kids with a future. And you contrast that with the inner city kids that you talk to, and it's so disheartening. These kids don't have a future.
No, not like that.
Tomorrow, that's it.
Yeah.
Nothing else for them.
No.
So what do they care? You risk it, do it.
You just underlined it. Once you realize that you don't have much ahead of you, you go for what you can. One of the people we talked to was at times earned $20,000 a week selling drugs.
Oh my God.
Now, if his community knows that,
yeah.
He's a big guy.
Oh, sure.
And the people that do make it out, like Chief Isom, who's included that, lived in North St. Louis, but in a neighborhood that was solid, with 2 parents.
Yeah.
So he represented most of us in growing up. So you can't really apply his experience to these other children.
Yeah.
And there will be exceptions always, but that's the problem.
The problem is so big and it's so complex. Is there any reason for hope?
Yes, there's always reason for hope. This church I go to in North St. Louis, St. Matthew the Apostle, the front yard has a wrought iron fence around it. And at night and in the morning when kids are waiting for their buses, they come into the yard of the church because it's safe to wait for their bus. I can't imagine any of us having that kind of experience out here. But because they feel safe, we know that we can help them feel safe. There are things that we can do.
Yeah.
And yeah, so I believe in hope.
Well, I fall back maybe on the old saw that any problem people have created, people can solve.
That's right.
If we have the will, if we're willing to spend the money and make the changes. Are we? Or do we feel like, that's an inner city problem?
That's what we've been doing.
problem.
That's right. That's what we've been doing. And so I'm not relying on the surrounding communities to fix the problems that are there. What I'm asking for is attention, which is different. Yeah. Because once you have someone's attention, you can ask for their help in many other ways.
You've gotten us off to a great start. You have gotten our attention with a very compelling story. Thank you for being with us. And thank you for watching. I'm Jim Eltoff, and I'll see you next time on HEC TV.